cafe is open. There will be art lessons. We'll have some other fun stuff going on here. Different lessons, hangout times, stuff like that, opportunities for you to do some cool stuff in the community. So that is every Wednesday, every Thursday, all summer. There will also be some leadership type small groups. Mackenzie will be leading those again this summer. Here's what that's all about. So last summer there was a group of like 7 or 8, and they would go out to eat. Sometimes they'd go hang out at the park. One time we went hiking at Old Man's Cave and went out to eat and stuff. So the group did that together, but they also studied like what it means to follow Jesus and to be an example for Jesus here at the Escape. And so we want to do more of that this summer. And if you'd be interested in doing something like that, there's a clipboard that says like, I'm interested in a summer small group back on the help desk. If you're interested, write your name and phone number. Just because you write your name down does not mean you're going to wind up in one of those groups, but at least it means we know that you're interested in the potential. So if you want to be part of that, she'll be doing really cool stuff with all the groups, going out to eat, going hiking, going swimming. I don't know. It'll be great. So if you're interested, sign up back there and we will let you know if we're going to put you in one of those. Biggest thing, you're going to have transportation. Not only for that, but for anything you want to do with the Escape this summer. We do not run the vans during the summer. So if you normally ride the van to get here, you got to figure out another way to get here on Wednesday night. That also means we do not run the van for you to get home. So if you have a parent that drops you off on Wednesday nights, but you always have to ride the van home, for this summer you need to figure out how you're going to get home, because I'm not going to be real happy if you're still here at 10 o'clock when I can be at home with my wife and baby. So there's that. So that's big picture plans for the summer. As mentioned last week, 4th of July, we're doing a big outreach over at the city park again this year. We're going to take all the DJ equipment over. We're going to hand out thousands of popsicles. We're going to dance, we're going to scream. It's going to be ridiculous. That's on the 4th of July. Then at the end of the summer, we are going on the mission trip. That's just for high school students. If you were not here last week and you were planning to go, raise your hand, because I have an info packet that you need. Okay, who needs one? Who needs one? Okay. Wow, this is awkward. Can you just... Oh, it's only for high schoolers, so...
No, it's not for you.
Okay, so this is just for high school students. Also, hey, listen. If you have not yet filled out an application to go on this trip, you cannot go on this trip without filling out an application, okay? So the application has to be turned in by next week. If the application is not turned in by next week, you will not go on the trip. Just because you turn in an application does not mean that you will go on the trip. So understand all of that, get the application turned in. It's going to be a week in Cincinnati. We're going to be doing all kinds of stuff, and it's going to be great. So I'm going to pray over what's going to happen tonight, what's going to happen during the summer. Then we're going to get right into it tonight. God, thanks so much for what you're doing here at Escape. Thanks for the students who decided to spend their evening here, even though they could be a lot of other places. I pray the stuff that we see and hear tonight will make a difference in our lives, and that we leave here ready to live differently, ready to live more like Jesus is coming to be. Amen. This video has Spanish subtitles and we can't get rid of them, so just live with it. Hold on.
When you first realize what God is like, it's very natural and proper to respond in fear or even terror. But But then God explains to you, look, there's nothing else you have to fear in life now. And now you are my child, and it's an amazing feeling. And then he says, and I want you to follow Jesus. I want you to be like him. I want you to live like him. And you realize, wow, following Jesus, that means I give everything up. And then you realize, no, this is worth it. This is a good thing. This is what I want to do. But at times, it may even feel overwhelming or impossible. And Jesus says, that's why I'm giving you my Spirit. He's going to empower you. He's going to lead you. And he's going to enable you to accomplish this mission that I've given you on this earth. And so when you begin to understand these three interwoven entities, it's like your whole world has to change. And it's like all these years you've been living one way, you've been thinking just about yourself and doing your thing, and now you realize you're a part of something bigger. It's like stepping into a whole new world because now you've got a mission. But what is that mission? After he rose from the grave, he says, I want you to go and I want you to obey everything that I commanded you, but I also want you to teach others to obey everything that I've commanded. This is what we call discipleship. And Jesus said, I want you to go and I want you to make disciples of all the nations. I want you to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I want you to teach them to obey everything that I commanded you to do. Well, I understood that. I never understood something until later on in my life. As I read in the scriptures, I realized that God doesn't want me to do this by myself. He doesn't want me just to follow him on my own. That's why he created church, the church. He says, now you're part of a group of people. You don't do this by yourself. See, in my mind, when I thought of church, I would think of a building or I would think of a service. But when you read the Bible, that's not what it's talking about. In fact, if Jesus was on the earth right now and you ask Jesus, hey, where's the church? He's not going to give you an address or point to a building. He would explain, the church, those are the people on this planet who fear me, who follow me, and are filled with the Spirit. We now, before God, should have a fellowship together, a sharing, not just of thoughts, ideas, but a sharing of everything, to really care for one another. And that's this idea of fellowship. It's sharing as a family. It's sharing as a body, like a temple. We're part of something bigger. And this word fellowship is so huge in the Bible. And this drives me crazy because for so much of my life it was almost like an afterthought. When I would think of fellowship, I would think, there was that one part of the church building called the Fellowship Hall, and after a gathering on Sunday morning, we would go in the Fellowship Hall, and one guy would bring dessert, another guy would bring cupcakes, another guy would bring some meat, and we'd have this thing called the potluck in the Fellowship Hall, and so that meal together was fellowship. Or in church we would have fellowship night where we get together and play softball, and so to us that's fellowship. But in the Bible, man, it is so much more intense than that. In the Bible, man, there's this awesome passage in Acts 4 verse 32, and it says that the full number of those who believed were of one heart and one soul. And then it says that no one claimed that any of his possessions belonged to himself, but instead that they would share everything in common, and they would give as people had need. There was a sense of mission together. This is what he meant by fellowship. Now that's a lot different from a potluck. It's this idea that we're one now. We're family. There was this guy that came to my church once, and he was a part of a gang, and decided to ditch everything and follow Jesus, and he got baptized, and one of my buddies asked him, they go, "Hey, where you been?" He says, "When I got baptized," he goes, "I thought that it was going to be like when I got jumped into the gang." He goes, "When I got jumped into my gang," he goes, "suddenly everyone had my back. We became like a family, 24/7. He says, "So when I got baptized, I thought, this is what's going to happen with the Christians." He goes, I didn't know that it was just Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, because I thought it was going to be family. So he goes, I just had it wrong in my head. And yet when I heard that, I thought, no, you got it right. We've got it wrong. And honestly, it was heartbreaking, because I thought, the gangs are a better picture of family than the church is. The gangs are a better picture of the body than we are. They're having a fellowship and a sharing that we don't see in the Church of Jesus Christ. And yet that's the very thing that Jesus wanted for us. You see, even this mission that we've been sent on, he says, we're supposed to together proclaim the excellencies of him who called us out of darkness into this marvelous light. This idea of proclaiming it, I can't do that without other people. See, I can talk about Jesus. I can talk about Jesus by myself, but I can't show Jesus to other people. Here's what I mean. I can tell you, Jesus forgives you. Jesus forgives you. Jesus is forgiving. But that's not enough. God says, I want you to show Jesus to the world. So that means I need my brothers and sisters around me, and we offend one another, but we keep forgiving. And then suddenly the world looks on and goes, I've never seen that before. You guys just keep forgiving each other. You see, unity is so strange in our world. We live in a time when people are so quick to ditch one another. And God says, I want my church to be different. I want this one group of people that are devoted to sharing their lives together, sharing this mission together. When someone offends you, you forgive them. And then suddenly people are seeing the attributes of Christ. They're seeing it in the flesh. It's almost like that. What Jesus did in putting God to flesh so that we could dwell amongst him, he says now that's the church's responsibility. I want you to love each other so much. And when you do that, they'll actually see God. His plan was fellowship. His plan, he says in John 17, when Jesus prayed, he says to God, he goes, I and them, you and me, may they be brought to complete unity to let the world know that you have sent me. There's something about our unity that makes the message believable. And that's why we can't do it by ourselves. Look, if I'm perfectly honest, I am far more comfortable doing this by myself. It's a lot easier. I don't have to put up with different personalities and different arguments. It's just nicer. Let me just have my own relationship with God. But God says, that's not what I designed you for. Here's the mission. I need you to show Jesus to the world by the way that you interact with one another and love one another. So if I'm to accomplish this mission that God's given me, I need others with me. I gotta have them with me. And if you think about it, this is how he designed human beings. We weren't meant to live in isolation. And this completely flies in the face of those who say, I've got my relationship with God. I don't need the church. I don't need, these little gatherings, or, I love Jesus, I just hate the church. We can't say that. You're going against everything Jesus asked you to do. God says, I designed you to be together. It's so beautiful when you work together and have one heart, one mind, one soul. And he says, and I'm going to do this. The beautiful thing, Jesus said 2,000 years ago, I will build my church, and the gates of hell won't stand against it. I will create this type of supernatural unity and gathering. And so it's not something that we have to force, like, okay, let's do the fellowship thing, let's make it happen. No, God says, I'm going to make it happen. And the question is do you want to be a part of it? Do you want to have this sharing, this fellowship that God intended for his church? Or do you want to continue living in isolation? It's an exciting time right now because I'm seeing God just bring people from all different parts of the world, and they're all having the same conviction of church was meant to be more. There was supposed to be a greater unity, and everyone's feeling the same thing. Everyone's sensing the same thing, going, the way we've been doing it doesn't seem biblical. When I read in the Bible, there should be a deep love. It's not just a bunch of people coming in a room and staring forward. It's a family, it's a body. And I'm talking to these people. It's been really weird where they're going, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm thinking. We're all thinking the same thing. Why? Because there's one Spirit. And he's leading us all to this conviction of things have got to change. There needs to be this fellowship in the church again. And this is something Jesus is doing. Decided to follow Jesus with your life, and you really have his Spirit in you, then you're my brother, you're my sister. In God's eyes, when he looks down, he sees us as family, and he wants us to live that way. And that's what he means by fellowship.
And if I eat an onion by accident, like that flavor is in the food that I'm eating, I can taste it not just for like 5 or 10 minutes, but like all day, and sometimes overnight, and the next day. And it's just like, why can't I get this taste out of my mouth? And if I'm honest, that's kind of how the word fellowship is to me. Like, growing up, fellowship, like kind of like he was saying, fellowship was like a dinner. Like, you stayed after church, you went to a dinner, you were still in your uncomfortable clothes,
you watch this super fat guy sitting across the room eat like 6 plates and get it all over himself on the floor. Like, that was fellowship. Or fellowship, they'd advertise, we're going to do this thing on Sunday night. There's going to be food, fun, and fellowship, which basically meant the food's going to be all right. Nobody's going to have fun, because if you do, you're probably going to get in trouble. And there's going to be some really terrible Southern gospel music played in the background. Like, that was fellowship growing up. And so I've kind of avoided using that word at all costs, because fellowship is not something that I wanted to do as a teenager. It's just not, Like, the food part was okay, everything else I can do without it. Or, there would be fellowship time at church, and what that meant was, okay, we just got done singing 12 verses of this song. The pianist is going to play through another 12 verses while you awkwardly walk around and shake hands with a bunch of people you don't want to touch. That was fellowship. And so, growing up, like, that's the taste that was left in my mouth. That's what that word meant to me. And so it's just not a word that I really have used often. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad word. That doesn't mean that those things that are in my mind are what fellowship really mean. And so, as Francis Chan kind of unpacked it a little bit tonight, I hope you were listening in and catching some of this vision. Fellowship is not any of the things that I just mentioned. It's not. Fellowship is living life as a family of followers of Jesus outside of the walls of this church. And it starts here, okay? So what we do here on Wednesday nights, on Sunday mornings, it's super important. This is where relationships are built. This is where we meet people. This is where we figure out what following Jesus looks like, what it feels like. This is where we find some help and some support to kind of launch us a little bit further in that following Jesus thing. This is where we kind of figure out where we fit into the body of Christ, where we can use our talents and our abilities to do good things for the sake of the gospel. Like, this is kind of base camp, but this should not be the box in which fellowship happens. Like, this shouldn't be it. We shouldn't just be a family when we show up here on Wednesday nights. We shouldn't just be friends when we show up here on Wednesday nights. The idea of fellowship is doing life together, is meeting each other's needs, whether we're in this building or not. The idea of fellowship is helping each other grow and be more like Jesus, whether we're here in this building or not, whether your small group leaders are here or not, whether somebody's reading the Bible to you or not. The idea of fellowship is, these are my people. These are the people who walk with Jesus with me. Like, we were never meant to live for Jesus by ourselves. We were never meant for this Christian life to be this long, lonely road where nobody knows what we're going through. Nobody knows how we're feeling. Nobody knows how hard it is to follow Jesus. Like, that's not how it was meant to be. When Jesus was on the earth, he didn't just call one disciple and be like, okay, Peter, you're going to be the guy. I'm going to build my church on you. I'm actually going to leave earth. It's all on you now. Like, it's yours. Cool? No, like, that's not what Jesus did. Jesus was like, hey, Peter, come on. Hey, James, come on. Hey, John, come on. Hey, Andrew, come on. And so he calls all these people, and this family is built. This group of guys, they become best friends. They do life together. They eat together. They travel together. They watch people be healed together. They see the feeding of the 5,000 together. They experience Jesus together. And this family was formed. And it wasn't in a church building. It was doing life together around Jesus. And that's what it's meant to be now. Like, we're all supposed to be doing life together around Jesus, not just in this building. Like, as we go about our day, as we do what we do in our week, whether it's playing sports, whether it's going to school, whether it's going to a job, it's just so much better and so much easier and so much more rewarding if there are those people in your life that you can have fellowship, that you can have family, that you can follow Jesus with. So I kind of wonder, like, do we really have fellowship here at the Escape? Or do we just show up and do church one day a week? Is it just like that awkward, okay, let's come together, let's shake hands, that's fellowship, you know? Like, is that what we're doing here? Because sometimes I kind of feel like it might be. Are we just here in this room tolerating each other because this is church? Or do we see ourselves as the church? Do we see ourselves as having fellowship with one another because Jesus has saved each one of us and called us to follow him, and we're all trying to follow Jesus together? And I don't know how you feel about that, but I don't know that we're doing the best job. I mean, now there are some in this room that I know the people that you hang out with are the people that go to church here. The people that you hang out with are the people that I see you spending time with at school. Like, you're pretty open about the fact that you're Christians and you spend time together, and I know that some of y'all have even gotten in the habit of doing like devotions or Bible studies together, or going to Christian clubs together or whatever, and you're really walking this thing out, like out in the open. You've taken it to the next level. You aren't just doing Jesus when you're here with those friends, you're doing Jesus everywhere with those friends, and that's great. But what if we took that farther? What if we did that on a larger scale? What if each one of us, whether we're like best friends or not, were to look out for the needs of each other outside of these walls throughout the week? Like, my Hamilton people, raise your hands. I mean, look at that. There's half a dozen Hamilton people in the room tonight. What if you had each other's back at school, whether you're best friends or not? What if when somebody was struggling, you tried to meet the need? What if when one of you forgot your lunch, the other 4 or 5 of you were like, don't worry about it, I got it? What if you saw one of the other Hamilton students at school like having a really bad day, and you were like, hey, you all right? No, I'm not okay. Here's what's happening. Can I pray for you? What if that's what this fellowship looked like? How many Vandy kids we got in the room? Oh man, Vandy kids are going to whoop the Hamilton kids. But what if at school, even when everybody else is going crazy and being super disrespectful and getting themselves in trouble, what if this group of Vandy students, what if y'all had fellowship and you were determined to follow Jesus together at school? Like, what if you said, you know what, I don't care what everybody else is doing. I don't care if people don't think we're cool. I don't care if we get made fun of for doing what's right. We, as a group, as a family, as those who follow Jesus and have fellowship with Jesus and one another, we are going to do what's right in this school. And nobody's going to stop us. And we're not going to feel alone because we're all in this thing together. Like, we're all following Jesus together. I'm not doing this as an individual. I'm doing this with every other student who knows and loves Jesus, who knows and serves Jesus. I'm doing this with all of them. And I'm going to do it boldly. And I'm not just going to serve Jesus on Sundays and Wednesdays anymore. I'm going to serve Jesus every single day at Vandy. And same goes for the Edison students and the PHS students and the South students. And the homeschool students. It's kind of hard to like find those people like in your house to be like, I'm going to follow Jesus with that. That's my cat. But still, like, there are these homeschool co-ops, and I know a lot of those homeschool groups. There are a lot of really solid Christians in those groups, and you be that force for good. When you show up at the I know there's going to be a big homeschool dance here in Parkersburg pretty soon. And when you show up for that thing, like, be Jesus there, in fellowship with one another there, Like, determined to be the shining light in that space, because not everybody's going to know Jesus. Some of you have jobs. Find other people who know and love Jesus at your job. and determined to have fellowship with those people, to love Jesus with those people, and you're going to impact the people around you, you know? And man, if we could all do that in our schools and then come back together here and have fellowship with one another here, not only are we going to change our schools, but we're going to change the community by uniting the schools, because each school has this core group of students that's so committed to following Jesus and to meeting each other's needs that all of a sudden, like, the Vandy Hamilton fight's going to be like, whatever, like, we follow Jesus, you know, like, we're part of the same family. We might go to different schools, but it's not really a big deal. I'm not going to yell and scream and cuss at them at the game, because they're my brothers and sisters in Christ. They're my family, you know? Like, what if we could get to that point, and what if it started through the Escape? What if the fellowship, the friendships that we've built here could translate so clearly into these schools in our community that all of a sudden we're changing our schools from the inside out, and then we're changing the community from the schools out? Like, it's possible. But we've got to take the church outside of these walls. You know, we've got to live for Jesus outside of here. We've got to find that backup that we need in the people sitting around us here, so that we have the boldness and the courage and the manpower to really make a difference in our schools, right? And it's going to take some adjustment, I think. Like, we're so used to just, okay, I'm going to the Escape for church on Wednesday night. And that's kind of it, you know, like, that's your church for the week, or for the 2 weeks, or for the month, or for the 2 months, or, you know, like, I did church. It doesn't work like that. You don't do church. If you are a follower of Jesus, if you claim to be a Christian, and you really are, you are the church, okay? And if you aren't being the church everywhere, then the church isn't functioning as it's supposed to. The church is every follower of Jesus. The church is every Christian, no matter where you are. And we've got to take that, we've got to get that out of here and get it into the community. Come in here and get some Jesus on Wednesday nights. Get some Jesus on Sunday mornings. And then take what you get out there in force with your friends who get Jesus here. And it goes beyond just this place too. Like, we're not the only good followers of Jesus in the community. Like, we're not the only ones getting it right. We're not the only ones who are part of the body of Christ, who are part of the family of Christ. It's not just us. Okay? Like, our friends over at North Parkersburg Baptist, and our friends over at the Burn, and our friends at Grace Gospel Church, and our friends at the Warehouse. Like, we got to take this fellowship to them too. It's not just like, okay, this is our Christian posse at Vandy. We all go to the Escape. If you don't go to the Escape, you may be a Christian, but you're not in our fellowship. You're not part of our church. Like, man, if that's the way you're playing the game, you're a loser. That's not the way the body of Christ works. Like, when I'm talking about taking it outside of these walls, I'm not talking about taking the Escape outside of these walls. I'm talking about taking your walk with Jesus outside of these walls, connecting with other Christians, and making a bigger impact because you're connected with these other Christians from other churches who are reaching other people. Like, we got to go bigger than just this. We got to go bigger than just inside these walls. And it's not, I'm not suggesting, you know, start a new club. I'm not suggesting start a bunch of Bible studies. I'm not suggesting, you know, start a new youth organization in this place. I'm suggesting just go live for Jesus wherever you are with the other friends who follow Jesus. And that's where change is going to begin to happen. I'm more likely to do something for Jesus if there's somebody else there to do something for Jesus with me. That's just kind of how it works. I'm bolder. I have more boldness when someone else is willing to be bold with me. I'm more likely to start a conversation about Jesus in my friend group if I know that somebody else in my friend group is going to keep that conversation going. I'm more likely to do something really great for someone If I know that somebody's going to have my back, if I'm going to get made fun of for doing that really great thing for that person. Like, that's just the way it works. That's the way, I would imagine that's the way that your ability to follow Jesus works too. Like, there's strength in numbers. You're going to do better when somebody else who believes the same thing that you believe, somebody else who loves Jesus the same way you love Jesus, is right there with you. That's the idea of fellowship. I don't know if you caught this or not, but when Francis was talking in that video, he talked, and you're going to talk a little bit about this in your small group, but he was talking about this guy who, he had been in a gang, he left the gang, he became a Christian, a follower of Jesus, he was baptized, he was part of this church, and that's great. And he came for a while, and then he stopped coming. And somebody asked him, like, why aren't you coming to church anymore? And he was like, I had more of a family when I was in the gang than I do here. And when you first hear that, it's like, okay, like a gang is a family. That's just the way it is. And if you've watched the movies, if you've read the books, a gang is a family. Like, everybody's got everybody's back all the time. It's pretty extreme. It's pretty intense. And as much as maybe we wish that the church was like that, maybe that's too intense for us. I mean, I'm not saying that it should be, but maybe it is. But you stop and think about your athletic teams. Man, at the end of a volleyball season, at the end of a cheer season, at the end of a basketball, football season, at the end of a track season, how do you feel about your teammates? Man, we're family. Like, we stick together. We've been through a lot together. Man, somebody messes with them, they're going down. Like, I'm not going to put up with somebody messing with my family. Why can't we be like that as the church, Like, the game that we're playing is a whole lot bigger and more important than putting a ball through a basket. It's a whole lot more important than putting a ball in a goal. It's a whole lot more important than handing off a baton and crossing a finish line. Like, what we're playing for, what we're pushing for, what we're trying to win is so much bigger than any of that. But how invested in our team are we? How much time and effort are we willing to put into our team? And a lot of times I feel like it's not very much, Like, we spend time with our teams at school, like basketball, football, soccer, whatever. We spend time with those teams whether it's convenient or not, right? Like, I am going to show up. I am going to put in the time. I'm going to be the best that I can be. And with this, it's like, I mean, if I'm not too tired, I'll be there. If none of my other teams are meeting, I'll be there. Like, is that really fair? Is that really going to build this fellowship and this unity that we need? Like, if you bail on your teammates, if you bail on your brothers and sisters in Christ, you're the family of God, every time something else comes up, is that really any way to build this strong team that we need to change the world? I don't think so. How committed are you? I'm not saying how committed are you to showing up to hear me talk. Because quite frankly, if this was all about me talking, most of you probably wouldn't be here. Like, we're just going to be honest. And I'm not offended by that. Like, this is not supposed to be about me. This is supposed to be about us following Jesus together. How committed are we to that? Guys, we need this. We need this fellowship. We need to take it farther. We need to be the church out in the community. We need to have each other's backs. And when I say have each other's backs, I don't mean when somebody pulls your hair, you fight for them. I don't mean when somebody throws a punch, you throw the next one to defend them. That's not what I'm talking about at all. What I'm talking about is when somebody's struggling, you're there to pray. When somebody's needs aren't being met, like they don't have the food and the clothing they need, you're there to help. When everybody else is telling your friend that they're nothing, that they're never going to amount to anything, that they're not any good, you're there to speak the voice of truth, the voice of hope, the voice of God into their life. That's what I'm talking, like having somebody's back. I'm talking when somebody's really messing up, doing something really stupid, having their back is you being willing to say, as their friend and fellow follower of Christ, man, you got to get back on track before you wreck yourself. And that's part of fellowship, like having the hard conversations with each other. Because when you really love somebody, you don't let them hurt themselves. You don't let them do something that's going to destroy their lives. We need this. Not just for our sake, but for the sake of our schools, for the sake of this community. We need to be a family so that people out there can see, man, there's something going on with this Jesus thing. There's something going on with this church. These students at the Escape, they care about a whole lot more than just themselves. People are drawn to unity. People want to be part of a good team, right? People want to be part of a group that gets along and has fun together and loves to do life together and meets each other's needs. People want to be part of that. If people are looking at us, do they want to be part of us for those reasons? If not, what do we need to do to fix it? And listen, my goal tonight is not like, this is not a lecture, okay? It's really not. There are some groups of students in this room who are nailing this, and I'm proud of that. Like, I love when I'm over at PHS on Tuesdays handing out popsicles and stuff. It's so cool just to see pairs of Escape students walking out together, hanging out together, and then we all come together, we hand out popsicles. Alizé busts some dance moves that should be illegal, and hits notes that should be equally as illegal. And you know, it's just like, that's like, in my mind, like, that's the clearest example of fellowship that I can give you. Like, nobody that shows up to hand out popsicles at PHS on Tuesdays has to be there. In fact, on a weekly basis, I don't ask a single person to be there. And typically, over the course of being out there, all of a sudden there are 5, 6, 7 Escape students just hanging out and talking and having fun and singing and serving people, and then leaving me to bundle up the tent all by myself because Alex is a jerk and he taught me to do that. But that's what fellowship looks like. Not the tent thing. But loving each other, loving the community, loving Jesus together outside of these walls. That's what we need. So be that. And I'll tell you what, one of the best ways to start building that fellowship, to start building that family, to get to know your brothers and sisters in Christ, and take your relationship with Jesus and other followers of Jesus to the next level, is to stay involved this summer. When we kind of downshift during the summer, we don't have small groups, and that's, for some of you, that's a bummer. For your small group leaders, we'll say it's a bummer. But during the summer, man, especially on VIP club days, the students who come on Wednesday night get put on the list to come back to VIP club on Thursdays. The students who come and hang out on Thursdays. What I've seen the last couple of years that we've done this, that group of students winds up being best friends. They go on the trips together. They play Super Smash together, whether they're good at it or not. They play instruments together. They play with Hope's Pet Rat together.
Hope has a pet rat? I didn't know that.
That group over the past couple of years has just gotten so close. And then, like, this leadership small group that we had last year, being part of that group, like, those students didn't just hang out in that group. Those students became the band and the leaders here, and they still talk about stuff they did last summer. They goof off as friends now when some of them didn't even know each other before last summer. And, you know, some of them hang out at school together now, and they didn't before they were in that group last summer. And they've learned to like each other, even though they've learned to like Liberty.
What?
Even though there are so many reasons not to. But she's found fellowship here at the Escape by being here and investing, and never going away. And, but that's what fellowship looks like. Different people getting along, doing life together, following Jesus together. And some of the combinations of people are going to be really unlikely. Really weird. Sometimes, like Billy. Like, he's as much part of this group as anybody else. And you know how that happened? He just kept showing up. And he just kept growing in his relationship with Jesus. And even when we were all like, man, is Billy still coming? He just kept coming anyway. And now it's like, what would we do without Billy? Like, I don't know. Billy, don't go anywhere, okay?
Come on.
Okay, so fellowship does not have to be lame. It doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be a dinner or shaking hands or bad Southern gospel music. It's supposed to be doing life together, meeting each other's needs together, being Jesus to your schools together, doing fun stuff together, having the hard conversations together, going places together, being there for each other when somebody just needs somebody to text about a hard time. That is fellowship. That is the church. Let's make it happen. Let's change our schools, these last few weeks of schools. Let's make a difference. The band's going to come up. They're going to lead us in a couple songs tonight. We're going to break up into small groups. So, band, come on up.
Oh yeah, Eric, remember when he got destroyed in Foursquare?
Hey, remember, get out. All right, let's stand up and sing. have a seat real quick before we break into groups? Hey, first of all, after tonight, there are only 2 more weeks of small groups, so make them horrible for your leaders. Hey, be super respectful to your leaders. If they ask you to do something, do it. If they ask you not to do something, don't do it. Make sure